morning. So today is a second full day on Shetland, and while it was quite nice and quiet yesterday, tonight the wind has picked up speed. Now the weather is changing pretty quickly, so there's some sun, and then rain showers, and then sun again. And yesterday we were on the southern part of the main island.
And today we are gonna stay around in the middle. So we're gonna go to Scalloway, which is just west across from Lerwick. And we're gonna spend a little time in Lerwick as well. But we're starting the morning with a walk, exploring the beach that is just right next to our accommodation that we're staying in. And so this morning was already quite different. It was a lot windier than the previous days. People also come here to fish, and this is the tide in at the moment, and sometimes people, when the tide is away, can row up on the big rock and they can just cast the lines from there. And now we are on the way to Scalloway. And Scalloway used to be the capital of Shetland before Lerwick. And it was around about in the 19th century when that changed. Now it's mostly a place with fishing industry, and we are first visiting the museum. There's a few interesting displays about traditional Shetland crafts. There's some of the famous Fair Island knit. And I'm filming these old cameras for its modern successor. We've got this nice outdoor area as well. Of course, a lot of the museum had to do with fishing and boats in general. Right next to the museum is Scalloway Castle. If it's not open, you can get the key to the castle from the museum. But in this case, it was open, so we were just able to go in and have a look around. They began building this castle in 1599 and finished it maybe around 1600, because that's the inscription above the door. This was an important place. Local courts were sending representatives here for trials at the central court, also known as the lotting, and only the castle tower remains of the original structure, which would have been L-shaped, so there was different buildings around it as well. This was built for Patrick Stewart, the second Earl of Orkney and Shetland. He was also the one who had the Laird's house built at Jarlshof, if you remember that from the last video. So just to recap, his father was the illegitimate son of James V, and he received the office of Sheriff of Orkney and Shetland from his half-sister Mary Queen of Scots. And then later his father became the Earl, and Patrick was then the second Earl. Patrick was considered to be quite a ruthless ruler, but it was mainly to do with the landowners, as he expected them to contribute contribute workers towards building his castles, and he would offer no drink or food to his workers. He would also claim all the driftwood for himself. As you can imagine, there's not very many trees growing on Shetland, so wood was rare, and driftwood would have been the only source of timber. People even claimed that human hair, blood, and eggshells went into the mortar to build this castle. And despite having lots of debts, he had a very lavish lifestyle, and he would spend a lot of money on just life in general, but also building new places. So, for example, the Earl's palaces in Kirkwall and Bursey, he spent a lot of money on in Orkney. He would receive taxes from people, but not in money, but in goods. So there was wadmeal, a rough cloth, low-grade butter used for lubrication, and fish oil used for oil lamps. And these were sold off to German merchants. As much as he annoyed the landowners, he was not unpopular with the small people, as he upheld the law. In Shetland, this law was based on the Norse law, and compared to, for example, Scottish law, it would have been more rigorous, and there was many different aspects to it. So different offences were specified with different fines. Assaults on different parts of the body would procure different fines. Since we are in the hall, a quick word on the castle itself. The concept was defense meets comfort. So the windows had glass and shutters. Guest rooms had fireplaces and latrine cupboards. This hall would have had big tapestries hanging, and in total there was 4 floors. So really quite a comfortable life for the time. So what happened to Sir Patrick? He was behaving very aggressively towards the landowners, and this was his downfall. He had terrible rages. He tore out his hair and screamed insults at everyone. And he had fights with everyone as well, including his family. And so after 1603, the King, James VI, decided to revive the bishopric of Orkney, and a bishop was reinstated in Kirkwall, and that meant a great loss of revenue for Patrick. And since Patrick had big debts already, he put more and more pressure on the landowners, and so complaints about Patrick drifted to Edinburgh from 1590 onwards, but intensified from 1600. The king would side with him, but there was a point where he couldn't side with him much longer, especially after Patrick ransacked the houses of William Bruce of Somborough and Lawrence Bruce, who was his father's half-brother. In 1609, he was imprisoned in Edinburgh and later Dumbarton for 5 years, and he tried to get his son Robert to reclaim his Orkney properties for him. However, Robert lost the fight against the enemies of his father, and so Robert was hanged for treason in January 1615, and Patrick, a month after, was beheaded by the Maiden in the Grassmarket. So how did things change after that? It was mainly the landowners who benefited, but not the common folk. James Law, the Bishop of Orkney, was installed as the crown representative of the islands, and the traditional Norse-based laws, which are based on the common laws of Germanic origin, were abolished in 1611, and the law book disappeared. And there was a switch to Scottish law, which is partly based on Roman civil law. The crown administrators started using land for their own ends, and smallholders would complain about fraud from big landowners. Scalloway Castle continued to be used as a fort, but changed hands. In 1701, the slates had fallen off the roof and the timbers were decaying, and in the second half of the 17th century, Scalloway's position was superseded by Lerwick as a centre for administration and commerce of Shetland. And finally, in 1838, the market cross in Lerwick became the official place for legal proclamation, rather than the castle gate at Scalloway. And then in 1908, the castle passed into state care. We returned to Lerwick to look at Fort Charlotte. It was first built to protect the Sound of Bressay from the Dutch, who began building the fort during the Second Anglo-Dutch War in 1665, and it was still not finished by the end of the war in 1667. How did the war come about? In 1600, Dutch merchants coming from East India were anchoring here for safety from the English Navy, to be escorted home to Holland, until Cromwell invaded Scotland in 1650 and declared war on Holland over trade routes, which resulted in 3 wars over the course of the 17th century. In 1673, the original fort burned down. During the American Civil War of Independence, the UK rebuilt the abandoned fort. It was named after the wife of George III, Charlotte. It still remains in its 1780 state, but has been used during World War II and is still an active base for recruitment. It's also used during the famous Aphelia celebrations each year on the last Tuesday of January since 1881. So since most places in Lerwick were closed at this point, we decided to go to one more location, which was out in the open and hence accessible 24 hours. And that is Stanydale Temple. Stanydale is a Neolithic site from the 3rd millennium BC, probably built between 2500 and 2000 BC. And it would have been occupied by Neolithic farmers who first came to Britain around about 2500 BC. But they also found pottery shards from the late Bronze Age, about 1000 to 700 BC, and the early Iron Age, 600 to 400 BC, which show potentially continuous occupation. The building itself is surrounded by at least 4 smaller prehistoric oval houses and standing stones. And only one of the oval houses was excavated, and you can see it just on the way. It was excavated by Charles S.T. Calder in 1949, and he originally dubbed it a temple because what he saw reminded him of Mediterranean temple design, such as ones found in Malta, which are Neolithic and early Bronze Age temples. However, this has since been dismissed, and now it is believed to be a similar structure to heel-shaped burial cairns, which are found all over Shetland. But it probably wasn't used for burials. The suggested use is a communal use, for example as a community hall or a place for an important person to live in. There are 6 shallow recesses in the walls with small hearths around them, but there is no central hearth as would have been typical in a normal home. There's also post holes with remain of Norway spruce, and this is not native to Shetland, so it was likely driftwood, and the roof probably would have also been made from wood, so they would have needed a good supply of driftwood, and the fact that they could get so much when driftwood was maybe quite prestigious suggests the importance. The walls are 3.6 meters thick, which is 11.8 feet, and made from huge dry stone blocks, some weighing 300 kilograms or 47 stones. The floor was kept clean from rubble, and there was also fragments found of a polished stone dubbed as Shetland knife, as well as burnt sheep bones, and this was interpreted to have a ritual character rather than a domestic one. And the finds are kept in the National Museum of Scotland. The structure was likely abandoned due to a drop in temperature during a cooling period, resulting in the formation of peat. Peat made it harder to grow crops, and eventually the peat would have covered the structure over. From the 1500s onward, people started to use peat as fuel, and eventually peat cutting would have revealed the remains of Stanydale Temple, and this is how it would have been discovered. So this is it for day 3 on Shetland, and we're finishing off with a nice sunset, and I hope you tune again next time as well. Thanks for watching.